once again, welcome to another episode of SIAM Speaks, where we have with us Miss Shweta Saini ji. And for the benefit of all the viewers here, I would first request you to introduce yourself so that they know your experience, past experience in this field.
Sure. Hello to everybody. I thank SIAM for inviting me to this very important event. My name is Shweta Saini, and I'm right now the founder and the CEO of Arcus Policy Research. We've been working in the field of bioenergy at least for the last 3 years in a very concrete manner. And very recently, we've started to explore the other biofuels, including CBG. So I'm happy to share my thoughts here, please.
Okay. Moving on to the first question that I have for you, ma'am. So ethanol production is usually criticized a little bit, at least, for the amount of water that it uses, or the kind of competition that it has with the food grains for usage in the sustainable mobility side of it. So what sustainable agriculture practices or the policy measures do you think can be assisted from either from the government side or from the producer side, that ethanol industry can properly expand or can be used in in the field of sustainable mobility?
Fairly. So, Deepak, when we did one initial work on ethanol and we evaluated how much of different feedstocks will be required to meet the mandate of E20 by 25-26, and we found that about 7 million hectares of uh, agricultural land will be required to produce the crops required to meet the E20 requirements. Now, Niti Aayog does a beautiful document that lists out these feedstock, and that's sugarcane, rice, and maize. So, as we know that amongst them, sugarcane and rice completely are water guzzlers. We also have direct trade-off between food, feed, and fuel, particularly in case of rice and maize. And therefore, there is an opportunity cost clearly involved in ethanol production from these three feedstocks. Now, on your question of looking at the life cycle and seeing how green the entire fuel will be. So, of course, we understand that when we burn a ethanol blended fuel, it is greener than an unblended fuel. However, there is water that gets utilized in the production of the feedstock that gets utilized for ethanol production. So in particular, if we look at precision agriculture techniques like drip irrigation, like direct seeding of rice, that ways at least the crops that are being produced for fuel would consume lesser water. But as I would say that in terms of competition, it is a direct competition, at least for the three crops when we're looking at the feed, food, and fuel nexus.
That makes sense.
But in comparison, CBG, compressed biogas, is completely green because it is in its truest form converting waste to value. So there are two clear benefits from CBG. One, you are getting rid of wastages, which would have otherwise polluted the environment, used your storages. And second, you're creating a fuel out of it. You're creating a value out of it, not just for the farmers, but also for the consumers, because you are creating a more greener fuel. So I think in comparison, gases, fuels like CBG are very green and therefore should be promoted.
So, ma'am, when we are discussing about the ethanol production cycle or the process, currently our focus majorly, even in India, is on 1G and 2G. Right. So, ma'am, in most of the research that comes out, we have heard that maybe in a way 2G and 3G, or later on 4G also, might be much more sustainable from the perspective of water shortage and from the perspective of food security. Do you have any views on that? Is that
No, I
true?
would concur. I would completely concur. It is actually the process via which the ethanol gets created that defines if it is a 1G or a 2G. In a very economist layman term, who's not really a techie on energy, the way we see it is if there is a crop that is being utilized directly and that has an alternate use, it's 1G. But for a crop whose byproducts or wastes are being used, and that we categorize as 2G. So, like rice stubble will and fuel coming out of rice stubble will be 2G. So clearly, we do aim to promote 2G. However, until recently, there were no commercially viable options, but now we see For example, bamboo-based 2G production catching up. And that is a very wonderful sign because northeastern states are being strategically asked to produce bamboo. And that being utilized for 2G production will be a phenomenal game changer. And therefore, just a few months before, we were actually not being able to visualize any contribution for 2G, but going forward, we certainly see this building up.
No, that certainly makes a lot of sense. Now moving forward, ethanol and CBG are one of those few solutions where we can just take a sustainable solution and implement it on a wider park without too many changes to the
To the power trends.
to the powertrain.
True.
Powertrain. So essentially, with a similar engine or with a similar structure of the vehicle, with just minor changes, a new fuel can be added, which is much more sustainable. Our thought was that in this scenario, what kind of policy support would be required for a rapid expansion of usage of these fuels to the for the public?
So, there are 2 to 3 parts to it. First of all, let's just look at ethanol. So, right now, at least the current fleet is compatible for blending up to 15%. Some say it even goes up to 20%. But for any rate of blending beyond it, the cars may not be immediately ready, and therefore the fleet will need to be adjusted. So, that clearly being the case. But I think what is critical is in order to be able to have more as in policy support in ensuring that such such bioenergy is actually created, you need to ensure that this energy does get created. Now we need to remember much of these are dependent on agriculture, and agriculture clearly is being more vulnerable to climate change. So we don't know what's going to happen in the coming February. As per IMD, the heat will be exceptionally high, and in case that happens, it will be a third consecutive year where the crop might suffer. So if something happens to wheat, rice invariably will have to fill in some of the gaps. If rice will have to fill in food gaps, then there will be gap on the ethanol blending targets, because rice is likely to play a more important role, particularly so just in light of the recent development where Government of India will be releasing FCI rice at a much discounted rate for ethanol production. So clearly what we need to ensure is that the government is able to support an ecosystem one where the feedstocks get supplied.
Okay.
So in case of CBG, they will have to, for example, 86% of India's agricultural households are small and marginal. That would mean they'll be in the hinterland where collection of stubble, for example, will be an issue. So while we were doing rice evaluation and stubble evaluation in Haryana, farmers said that big trucks come to collect the stubble bundles and they are not traveling on the thin roads that lead up to their villages. So there are a lot of logistical issues in first the collection. Second, in creating awareness for the farmers to be able to start valuing such waste. So they need to not burn it and rather have it collected and created into a bundle and supplied to a manufacturer. So that kind of an awareness campaign, pricing incentive, has to be created and promoted by the government. Also, what we see is that a lot of pressures in the existing value chain is on the storages and the movement. So like for ethanol, so ethanol gets supplied it has a seasonality.
Correct.
Storages become an issue. Logistical trucks become an issue because they have to travel hundreds of kilometers. So I see a lot of government support in ensuring much of this ancillary activities to happen. Second, what I feel is that government has to be a little more predictable in terms of policies, because ad hoc policy changes like what happened last December in case of sugarcane actually does jerk the system. But to be fair to government, food will always be prioritized over fuel or feed. So we see, but some predictability has to happen, and that delivers well for any policy to deliver.
That is quite insightful. That's it for the questions from our side. Thank you for so patiently waiting with us and answering all our questions. And once again, thank you for appearing on SIAM Speaks.